So thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Felicia Arriaga, and I am the North Carolina Statewide Police Accountability Network Coordinator, or the NC SPAN Coordinator. And this is our third week of doing this series, Beyond Policing, where our goals have really been to provide an opportunity for folks to gain a deeper understanding of what divestment means, gain a deeper understanding of the concept of policing, as well as how policing systems works, and to talk about the current political moment and to provide some background political education for folks. So today we're going to be talking about the possibilities of review boards, of police review boards. And so we have a great group of panelists who will be discussing this. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dawn Blagrove, who is going to be our moderator and facilitator for this conversation. She's wonderful, and she'll be able to introduce herself as well as give folks, the other panelists, an opportunity to introduce themselves too. So thank you all for being here. If you have additional questions, there is a Q&A function down at the bottom of the Zoom if you're looking at a computer screen or if you're on your phone, and you can drop some questions there that you would like us to answer at the end of the session. You can also put things in the chat. We already see some folks who have said hello to us, so thank you all for being here. But if you want something definitely answered at the end of the conversation, then make sure you put it in the Q&A so that we can get to it. But now I'll pass it over to Dawn. Thank you all for being here again.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Attorney Dawn Blagrove. I am the Executive Director of Emancipate NC. Emancipate NC's mission is to end systemic racism and abolish mass incarceration. I'm excited to be here with the panelists today who are going to talk to us a little bit about what police oversight boards are, what they should be, what they could be, and how they fit into our overall movement at this time. So without further ado, I am going to allow each one of our panelists to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about the work that they are doing and the organizations within which they're doing them. Let's start with Sean.
All right, thank you. And I'm pleased to be here, and I appreciate the time to represent Fayetteville PACT. I'm Sean McMillan, and my pronouns are he and him. I've been working with Fayetteville PACT for about 4 years now. We were inspired by the work of Raleigh PACT, so thank you, Rolanda Bird, Wanda, Akiba, everybody that was doing great work back in 2016. We were mentored by Blueprint and NC SPAN, especially Ivana Gonzalez. They said that if you like the work that's being done up in Raleigh, then why not start an organization in Fayetteville? So we started Fayetteville PACT in 2016. We started with a lot of advocacy for about our first 2 years. We engaged the community in a series of forums. We showed them some movies for free, and they enjoyed that. That was a draw. But we also started the conversations about what public policy and public safety could look like in our community, and what police reform could look like for the Fayetteville Police Department and the Sheriff's Office. I think we evolved. And when I say we, I'm mostly talking about my partner, Kathy Griggs, who's the president of Fayetteville PACT and co-founder, and then a small core group of board members now, but members back then. So we started out with advocacy. We began to understand what it meant to mobilize. And by last year, we were getting in hot and heavy with the city council, pushing them towards a review board. We're in the middle of that fight. We're in the thick of it. We actually just briefed our city council last Monday on our proposal for what oversight should look like, and are getting some good feedback, but it's up to a subcommittee for them now. So that's our main focus right now. Beyond that, ending cash bail, mobilizing coalitions locally, and then tackling some emergency conditions for COVID are our focuses now. But thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Sean. That was fantastic. And I am Emancipate NC as a point of transparency, works very closely with Fayetteville PACT and with Raleigh PACT. We are incredibly proud to partner with them and to see the work that they are doing. It is amazing. It's the epitome. These organizations are the epitome of what community organizing looks like, what it should be, and how it can move the mountains that seem immovable. So with that, let's move on to Rolanda.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rolanda Bird. I'm the Executive Director of Raleigh Pact. I've been part of Raleigh Pact since 2016 when my son, Akil Dinkins, was shot and killed by a Raleigh police officer. And I also I've gotten a lot of training and support from Blueprint, North Carolina, where Raleigh Pact started as a project of Blueprint, being facilitated by Ivana as well. And at that time, Aaron Bird was Executive Director of Blueprint. And so I really give a lot of thanks to those two people, Aaron Bird and Ivana Gonzalez, for allowing me to be the leader of Raleigh Pact after, of course, being a member for a few years. Our work here in Raleigh has gotten so much more heavy since the death of my son. There's been a number of other deaths by Raleigh Police Department, which has kept us very busy in the street and on the ground, which I feel is where the work is much more needed than behind the scenes in the office. So we've been really hard at going to city council since 2016 and trying to find other city leader targets for us to take our demands to get answers from, and to figure out who we actually need to be targeting and talking to on our demands and what we need of how we want our city to be ran, and how we want our citizens in the most impacted communities to be protected. And while doing all of that, making sure that we stay in close relations and many other coalitions around the city, such as Emancipate NC, REPS, YAP, and a few other organizations that we are close allies with. When we go, we've tried to get this strong community oversight board since 2016, with the subpoena power, investigatory power, and disciplinary power. But instead of giving us the one that will really protect the citizens as well as the police, they gave us this weak review board that is only there to look over police policy. So we still have some work to do as far as our community oversight board is concerned, but there's other low-hanging fruit that we've been also trying to make sure that we speak on, to make sure that they understand that it's not only one thing that we're trying to reach a goal on, that there's many other things that we have still to work on to make our city a better place for our communities of color.
Thank you, Rolanda. Kay, if you would take this opportunity to go ahead and introduce yourself and your work and your org to the audience.
Yeah, so I'm Kay, either she, her, or they, them pronouns. I am a native of North Carolina, originally born in Rockingham County, but I've lived in Guilford County for quite some time. I work with the People's PAC in Greensboro, which is a millennial-led Black PAC. Worked on policy and doing some leadership roles within Greensboro Rising. I'm on the Guilford for All steering committee, a field manager for a national nonprofit that works on field programs and resources for grassroots organizations. And I'm an advocate and volunteer for the Cure Violence program that we have here in Greensboro. And I currently sit on a community review board here. During the course of my work, I focused a lot on building some equity within the power dynamic, specifically in the Black community, around the ageism that happens and whose voices are we listening to in representing our communities, and also around economic equity and how policing impacts the equity and some of the things that we say that we want to hold up as values, but it is not actually being held up in practice. If there's ever anything else that you want to know about me, drop it in the chat. I'm fine with my email also being dropped into the chat. Typically, I try to focus my organizing work in Guilford County and in Greensboro, but I like to work to be a resource for people all over the United States.
All right, thank you so much. I'm really excited. Like, listen, I'm a moderator, and the biggest part or the hardest part of being a moderator for me is going to be closing my mouth and letting you all talk. But as you started talking about being a part of a Cure Violence movement in Greensboro, I did not realize that there was a Cure Violence in chapter in Greensboro, and I would love to hear a little bit more if we have time later on about the work that you guys are doing with Cure Violence. So, but we're going to stay on task. So right now, the next thing I'm going to add, I want each of you to discuss is, what is your ideal police oversight board? So Rolanda talked a little bit about the fact that we got what is being labeled and what is being referred to as an oversight board, but in Raleigh, but it is very, very, very far from what we've been asking for and what we think we need. So what I would like of you to do is discuss what an ideal oversight board looks like in your community, because we also understand that police accountability looks different and presents different in different places. That's why it's important for this work to be local, because you on the ground know what your community needs in order for your law enforcement agencies to be held accountable. So I'm going to start with Sean and ask him, what does, with no obstructions, in a perfect world, what does an oversight board look like for you?
In a perfect world, huh?
In a perfect world.
Right. In a perfect world, it's very much like what we're asking for now from our city council. We went big with our ideas and our resources because there's likely not going to be another time in history when we can reimagine a public safety from a community standpoint. So what we just proposed 2 weeks ago, Monday, to our city council was that we have some permanence by having something called a CPOA. So we call it a Civilian Police Oversight Authority. So instead of just asking for a CRB, we ask for permanent hires, people to sit in the seat full time. We got that idea from NACO, from the National Association for Civilian Oversight and Law Enforcement, and from attending a couple of their conferences and seeing that in major cities, in DC, in Baltimore, in Chicago, Miami, Atlanta, they already have these permanent structures where people are hired as oversight practitioners. They're credentialed by NACO, and they're trained to look at all intersections of law enforcement and the continuum of justice, and to be able to stand on behalf of citizens when they make complaints. So permanence and stability is something that, in a perfect world, we need from our oversight authorities. Then also last year, Kay, we had the privilege of talking with Letitia McNeil for a little while too. And we realized after talking to her that she's spread pretty thin. So we asked for a director and 2 investigators off top. So our director doesn't have to be stressed with running down facts in an investigation. And we also asked for an admin or a data person as well, so they can take a comprehensive look at the data that's coming from the police force, especially when it comes to use of force, and be able to forward that to make recommendations. So those components: an executive director, an investigator, and then somebody that handles data. As it gets bigger, you're probably going to have more operations folks in there, and also have some kind of mediation function. And the bigger cities also have legal advisors that are hired as well and are there permanently. Because we're a smaller city, we asked at least for those 4 people. And then we also need for that CPOA to be able to steward the CRB. So we have oversight practitioners that are hired on all throughout the year for a period of up to 2 or 3 years on contract. but also have a CRB, and that's the citizens that come in, the Citizens Review Board. And in our proposal, we're asking that that director take their time and build that CRB with the input of the community. So I think that's something that Letitia had the time to do, or Ms. McNeil had the time to do, actually engage the community on what they want the CRB to look like. And that CRB, we want it to be diverse. We want it to hold some expertise from former law enforcement, but also expertise from justice impacted families and individuals. Also expertise from around different parts of the city, so it's not concentrated just in downtown, just in Haymount or different areas of the city. We want it to have teeth. Rolanda, we understand what you're talking about, that it's very important for us that they have investigatory power and they can conduct those investigations independently and impartially. In a city like ours, because it's a small city, things are built on relationships, and that sense of team is very strong between the city council, the mayor, and law enforcement. And it's so strong that we don't have any confidence that any investigations conducted by internal affairs are at all impartial. We know that they're very slanted towards protecting police officers. And even when they go to the next level, they're also protected at the city council. So we want it to be independent physically, so in another building, but also some strong language in our ordinance about how the city council, the city manager, and the mayor are hands off when it comes to investigations. We also want it to be able to take a comprehensive look at law enforcement. So all these dozens of suggestions, great suggestions that we're getting from the community on improving police practices. We want our CPOA, that body, to be able to look at those recommendations, and from the standpoint of practitioners, be able to push some of the best recommendations up to the city council, to the mayor for implementation. So those are some of the things we want in our perfect world, but we're trying to build it right now. We're of course going to face some resistance. We already are facing resistance, but we're letting our city council and our mayor know that we're here for the long haul. We're not going to stop until we have a CRB with teeth and an independent body that can really stand on behalf of the citizenry.
So Sean, that is really, I think, the work that's happening in Fayetteville right now, and the work that you guys are driving is absolutely amazing. The work that you have put in to get to this moment, to be in a position to make demands, even though some of your city council folks took issue with you asking for demands or making demands and not begging during your last city council meeting. But what I want you to do is kind of slow it down just a little bit, because I know that you were talking about two separate and distinct bodies. Yeah. And I want you to take a little bit of time before we move on and describe exactly what those two bodies are. Make sure we're spelling it out when we're not too heavy on the acronyms, so that our translators can make sure that they're staying abreast of what we're doing. But if you could give us a real clear understanding of the two bodies that you're describing and how they work together to create oversight, that would be fantastic.
Okay, and no problem. Now I apologize to the interpreters because I spit that out very quickly without being mindful. And then forgive me, everybody, for using acronyms. That's my military background. We have an acronym, so many unnecessary acronyms that it's a bad habit. So the two bodies, one is, we're calling it but it can be called so many different things. It is a Civilian Police Oversight Authority. The acronym we use is a CPOA. And that is what we need to put in place first. So that is oversight practitioners. So it's usually somebody like Don with the JD that is leading the effort. Somebody who's a lawyer that's trained to look at the justice system and the continuum of justice, not only what's happening with the police force, but also how those interactions come about when we're dealing with the court system as well. And so that that lawyer, that trained lawyer, is the head of the Civilian Police Oversight Authority. And it is important to us that the practitioners have stability because in other cities where they don't have an authority and where they don't have practitioners in place, I know this from attending conferences with other practitioners, the CRBs often have, the citizen boards often have issues even getting a quorum together. So it could be an issue that they can't get the appropriate numbers of members to meet because they all have different daytime jobs. They have other things that take their attention. So we're really pushing for the practitioners in the Civilian Police Oversight Authority to be permanent hires. And then there's four positions in that CPOA and the Civilian Police Oversight Authority. It's the director, 2 investigators to conduct those independent investigations, and then an admin or data person. So that's one body, and that's permanent hires, practitioners. And then once that's set up and we have time to get them trained, they can go to NACO for credentialing and training. That body can then help stand up a second body, a civilian review board or citizen review board. And the citizen review board is much different because citizen review board is made up of people that aren't necessarily trained in law enforcement, aren't necessarily equipped by their professional experience to be involved, but can stand on behalf of their neighborhoods, on behalf of different parts of their city, can stand as representatives to say, we see the results of that investigation and we don't think that's right, and we have a different recommendation. So the CPOA, the Civilian Police Oversight Authority, conducts the investigation and they take the complaints. And then once they're done conducting those investigations, they make a set of recommendations and they hand that off to that second body, those citizens who are in the CRB. And the CRB takes a look at those investigations and those recommendations, and the CRB makes its own set of recommendations based on how a citizen sees that investigation. So that's where we stand up for ourselves as a community, and we have some input into the process. And then once the CRB is done making those recommendations, it goes back to the police chief and the city council for a recommendation on things like discipline for whatever that infraction was that was committed by the police. So
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sean, for clarifying that, because I think it's super important that people understand that there is no one way or right way to build accountability and to build these types of police oversight boards within whatever municipality you live in. And I think that this is the perfect time for us to jump over to Kay, because Kay is a part of an oversight board that is up and running, that is established, and that is fully functioning. So her perspective of what it's going to be, what a perfect oversight board is going to be, probably a little different because it's going to be informed by what she's seen and in the hindsight that she's gained from being on an oversight board. So Kay, tell us what a perfect oversight board looks like in a perfect world.
Okay, so can't be Sean with that, because that is exceptional, like exceptionally great amount of detail with it. The only thing that, and this is based on my opinion because I can't speak on behalf of my peers or colleagues or cohort, is that we fight oftentimes because I'm a community activist first. Before I sit on any board, before I sit on any commission, before I do any of that, I make it plain and clear. It may be worth a phone call, but the message is going to happen, and it's going to happen the way it would have happened whether I sat on here or not. But and being an organizer that has advocated for review boards and oversight committees and to be able to make policy recommendations, the biggest obstacle I've seen is in how do we compile those boards and those commissions? Like when we say community, we need to be clear about who are we defining as community, because they can go to the Black churches and say, you know what, these are Black people. They said that this is what they want and they love police and this is what we got. I mean, maybe if kids pulled the pants up, they wouldn't get in trouble. You know, we have to be very clear about the values and the principles that we want to see executed and who we actually see, not just based on popularity, but who do we see that actually promotes and executes on those values that we want them to have. Even if our board had subpoena power, we would not be doing subpoenas. Let me be clear. I'm gonna repeat that back. Even if we had subpoena power, we would not be doing subpoenas because our board may not be fully compiled of who in reality activists would actually want to see. And when you make the process a bit more political, like for example, your city council members are the ones who put people on the boards. We have to be mindful of who our city council people are when the cameras are on or cameras are off, because likely it's going to be their friends who are sitting on those review boards, or it's going to be people who need a level of political influence who may want to sit on those boards. So when you mention maybe they get a quorum, maybe they won't, that's part of that. Like what is the reason as to why you're there? And when you are there, if you are there based on relationships, as in, this is my friend, I'm so thankful that you put me here, I'm going to do the best that I can to please you, council person. Even with the most power in the world, we will not get the results that we want. So even if we had a review board that maybe didn't have as much as far as teeth, because the subpoena power is tied up with the state right now. My question is, why do we need subpoena power in a right to work state? If my employer did not like my hair, they could fire these chocolate cheeks at any moment. If they didn't like the last report I did, they could fire me at any moment. If it snowed outside and my little Centra can't get my kids to childcare to get me to work, I could be fired for that if it's not a state of emergency. So it's even in granting all of these powers, even in putting all of these things and measures in place, if we don't have the right people, but the right principles in place, we will never see liberation based on any policy, procedure, or board. So for me, what I would want to see would actually be a focus on who are we putting in these positions, because sometimes they may let 1 or 2 activists in, but if the vote takes 5, 2 or 3 ain't gonna cut it because it takes 5. So that would be my ideal review board. So it's not as not as detailed, but that is one of the biggest things that I've seen on the review board.
It's okay. And listen, you are really testing my will to be a moderator and be quiet, right? You are testing it right now. But there are a couple things that you said that really resonated, and I think it warrant a little deeper dive, okay? Because again, I told you, perfect world, not the world we have, but the world where we believe we can actually attain accountability through our boards. So you talked about the makeup of those boards. And I think, so I want you to talk a little bit more about who you think should be on these boards. Who should actually be on these boards? And again, don't worry about the constraints of who's picking, why they're picking, whatever. If you can have it however you want, who would you put on these boards? And second, I think it's so important to talk about the space between policies, whether they are in place or not, and the political will to create accountability. Because I think what I heard you talking about was that no matter how many policies we have, if nobody has the political will to actually create accountability and hold law enforcement officers accountable to the communities that they serve, it doesn't matter to a certain extent whether or not we have those policies in place or not. Now, it doesn't hurt, but it certainly creates an intangible barrier that is very important, that is often overlooked. So could you address those two things quickly?
Yes. So
Or
the
not
who,
quickly, take your time.
I tell people you can never handle organizing the mic and say, take your time. We'll be here 3 hours later. And that takes me into, but for the who, I would have the most impacted folk, the main folk for whatever that community makeup is. If that's disproportionately Black folk being impacted, I want to see not just Black folk impacted, or not just Black folk period, but like those impacted people from the communities that may be over policed or having a negative interactions. Most of your board, most of the people holding police accountable should be those people who are having the majority of the interaction with said police. I would like to see people who were formerly incarcerated sit on the review boards, because they would know better than Betty Boo Sue who on the other side of town that just is friends with the mayor. She, if you understand what I'm saying, the actual people who have been impacted by it and have gone through the criminal justice system will have visions and insight that everybody else will not have. So what does courtesy mean? Yeah, like it's different depending on who you're speaking with, especially in Greensboro. Courtesy means, did they throw you on the ground and hog tie you? No. Did they say ma'am and sir? Yeah, well, okay, well, that's courteous. No, it isn't, because why did you stop me in the first place? That's not courteous. Just because you had a smile on your face does not mean that was a good stop to do or anything else. So for the who, I would like to see the impacted folk, whether they are politically connected or not, if they have an analysis around it, if they have been impacted by it, if they see it every day in their communities, those need to be the voices that are overwhelmingly in power. As in, if it takes 5, that needs to be who makes up the 5. And the space between the policy and the will. I'll just say this about being here in my city. I sat down and reviewed some of our policing policies. On the surface, you would think it may look kind of decent, like, oh, we have a consent policy that says that they have the right to this and the right to that. But in execution, that according to police, it's not their job to have to tell you what your rights are. You need to be able to know what's inside of their policy manual, and half of them don't even know what's inside of their policy manual.
Okay, wait. My interpreters are saying, slow down, slow down.
I can't see there. I can't see there. I have to do it on my phone because of
slow down.
Acting up. But I'll roll that back and slow it down some. But we have some policies on the books right now that if activists actually saw it, would say, oh, this is actually not the worst policy in the world. This is a lot better than 99% of our counties or cities and municipalities across North Carolina. The issue is in the execution. If you hired the wrong person who does not have the will to let people know what their rights are or to treat them with courtesy, respect, and dignity, then you can have it written in your policy and procedures all day. And it's not actually going to happen. If when people complain, they have to complain to internal affairs, which is the same ones who are in the buildings and in connection with those same police officers, that policy is not going to actually get implemented. If you have a council that is only going to look at the policy as it's written and say, well, you know what, I read it and it seems to be no problem, and not actually look into how it's being executed, then it matters what we have on the books, but then it doesn't matter what we have on the books because they aren't actually doing it. And if they aren't open about where you can find those policies and procedures so that the community can create the political will that is necessary to actually get the implementation of it, then those policies and procedures don't mean as much.
All right, thank you, Kay, for that deep dive. Leslie, we're going to move over to Rolanda, who is the executive director of Raleigh PACT, who has an oversight board. Gosh, it hurts me. It pains me to even call it an oversight board because that is absolutely not what the City Council of Raleigh established. It is so far from what an oversight board should be. So I want Rolanda to spend a little bit of time talking to us about what she thinks it should look like, what Raleigh PACT thinks a real oversight board in Raleigh would look like, what it would be like. And again, same set of standards. Perfect world. You have everything that you want. You have all access to all of the powers and the information that you need. What does your board look like? What should the people be asking for?
Well, so, and what we've been pushing since 2016 is kind of a cross between Sean and what Kay talked about. Sean has this, like, more, I think, police, or not necessarily police, but council type focus board, which the only part of council that we want to be a part of this whole board or oversight is the mayor for the appointment of these folks. And again, I agree with Kay as far as who should be on this board. So for justice and policing in Raleigh, our current accountability mechanism is not sufficient at all. Police through their own internal affairs, and it's not acceptable. And the board that they implemented is, like I said, only a board to review police policy. And that's not what we want at all. So therefore, this board that they created is not a win for Raleigh PAC. So the work that we have left to do is, to try to create the one with the subpoena power, with the investigatory power, with the disciplinary power. And through having, so many, we did some investigating, we did some research, and on an average, there's like about 464,000 complaints that come in that we never see. Conflict of interest by the police is there because of their investigating themselves. That's why a board is needed. RPD will they receive like 31 complaints a year, which out of those 31 complaints, we never know what happens with those complaints. We don't know whether it was done transparently. Did the complainant have they don't get access to the details of the investigation, or what disciplinary action actually takes place after the investigation? They never give you answers to those things. There's a fear that's been put in place by community because people are afraid to go and file these complaints as far as how they're being perceived, or the bias of the fear of retaliation. So they don't report at all. So having the investigatory power and funding from the city to get this work done, the board can conduct full independent investigations of any complaints brought forward by the community, and require the city to have adequate funding for this. Personnel file access, well, I'm sorry, going to the subpoena power, the board can compel officer testimony and request evidence and data from the police department. Personnel file that says the board will have access to officers' personnel files in order to conduct investigations and make disciplinary decisions based on their prior behaviors. And with that disciplinary power as well, the board makes disciplinary decisions barring a clear error in the board's investigation. And then also the audit power, policy audit power. The board will regularly request, compile, and publish policing data and community feedback in order to identify trends and patterns in Raleigh policing and make recommendations regarding departmental operating procedures and training. So that's, again, something that Kay talked about. So, and it would be compiled of the mayor, who appoints the people. I guess the council will have the power to elect these people, but it will be community organizers or organizations. At least 6 of these members should be somebody that identifies as low income or working class, criminal justice involved, whether it be someone who's been arrested but do not have any ties to like probation or parole. So they have that experience, like as Kay said, as being someone who's most impacted, and have to be people of color. Must be a Raleigh resident or business owner and have no legal claims pending against the city, its departments or employees, and be fully committed to the oversight board training program, including racial equity training. Because like advisory does not mean accountability, and that's what is needed in our cities is accountability, holding these officers accountable for killing our people, and just not being able to stick to that same story that we've seen over and over again of I felt or I was in fear of. So we are tired of victim blaming, victim shaming, the conflict of interest that the police these boards been held in their, you know, in their buildings, in their areas of shared bias. So like we have to take this out of their control, out of their hands, and put it in our community and make it a community oversight. And that's most of what I have here. So
Fantastic. Thank you so much, bro.
Sure.
So this conversation, we've only gotten to one question so far, y'all, and we've used up a whole bunch of time, but I want to get to this one because I think in this moment, it's really important for us to understand whether or not you all believe that there is a connection or a nexus between community oversight boards and abolition. Is community oversight a tool towards abolition, or is it a hindrance towards abolition? And what I mean by that is that there right now in this moment, everybody hopefully has been paying attention, and you hear people calling for abolition of the police. Just abolish the system, tear the whole system down so that we can start fresh. And then there are those folks who are asking for reforms. Let's not tear the whole system down. Let's just fix it. Let's fix the parts that are broken. I will refrain from sharing with you all what my particular position is as a moderator, but I will say that I think it is very difficult to fix a system that is so deeply rooted in systemic and institutional racism. But I also think that to change systems, to replace systems, is a process that, if not done with deliberation and with intention, you can end up with systems worse than you had before. So, to this panel, I want to ask you again, what role does oversight boards play in the long-term goal of abolition? Does it play anything at all? Is it a completely separate avenue? Or can they work in tandem? Let's start with Sean.
It's a very tough question, Dawn. And I would probably give you a different answer on a different day, depending on how I feel and how encouraged I am about potential for progress. I had a conversation with a friend of mine this weekend about put in the context in this moment, Audre Lorde's saying, the master's tools can never dismantle the master's house. And that can be applied to almost anything we do. That can be applied to so many different systems of our oppressive government and our oppressive system, our oppressive justice system, especially. And some days I feel very cynical about the future of our community and our ability to have freedom and liberation with the current system. So my answer is not saying I can say it from experience. I might have a different answer, Kay, after I see our review board in action. But I'd say, if anything, it's not a concrete step towards abolition. But I think it may play a role in changing attitudes and culture. And I say that because talking to people in a small city like Fayetteville, there is an acceptance of the status quo that to anybody that can imagine things better, it just blows your mind that people are even afraid to do anything to rock the boat and to change a system. It's almost like there's this acceptance of something that you were born into that you feel like you're just going to die with. So why even fight? So there's a level of apathy that exists when you talk to a lot of people in our city, and that's why they don't try to even imagine something that's different. So that acceptance goes with what's going on, down at the detention center. It goes on with the horrible things that are going on in our court, and this might be a step towards giving some of those people that are hopeless and have lost hope in the system ever changing and think that we're just going to die with it. The idea that we can have bodies that actually speak on behalf of citizens and actually fight for the rights of people in the community. And because they haven't seen that before, it's hard for people to even imagine what it could look like. So if we can have a board that takes in an oversight authority that takes in the complaints of citizens, and community members can actually feel like somebody is fighting for them in an impartial way, that might start to change attitudes and in turn start to change our culture. And that culture right now has been a culture of acceptance. I think this uprising is changing that. I think this uprising is actually giving people the intestinal fortitude to say that I'm going to die fighting for something to change, because I'm not going to die with the system the way it is. So now is the best time to start making that cultural shift and that change of the mind. So that's not a complete answer. But.
Well, it's a tough question. And so I think that we got to be honest about it if we're going to have a real conversation about what we look like in this movement and how we move, and whether we are all moving in the same direction or whether we're, moving in opposite directions, trying to get to the same place. Sometimes that's okay too, right? There's no wrong way to do this. Rolanda, I want to jump over to you. What are your thoughts about the intersectionality between oversight boards or oversight in general and abolition?
Well, I'm speaking as a mother that lost a child to this system and the reasons why we're asking for these things. And I think it's a right now situation, and then abolition is like a long-term, long way down the road goal for all of us to end up at, So I think right now is what is needed is some type of oversight, because I know that is more reachable for people to probably attain at this point. And we need something in place right now to get a hold on these deaths by police, to get control over our police departments in our cities. And abolition is our long-term goal, which we know is going to take so much more work. And we still have to, we know that we have to get in some good trouble to reach that goal. So as long as we know we're all willing to get in that good trouble and to continue this fight to reach that goal of abolition, I really think it's two separate things. It's two separate fights. And I feel like that community oversight or some type of oversight that has nothing to do with police at all should be in place in every city across our nation to be able to at least be comfortable to become comfortable with moving towards the fight for abolition. So I really feel like it's two separate things.
Okay, thank you, Ro. And I think if I can try to capsulize what you're saying, I think what I'm hearing you say is that police oversight boards and police accountability boards and these kind of formal structures are the answer to the acute problem, the right now problem of policing, and the problems that we're seeing in the policing. And it is an acute way, it's a way to address the acute issues that we are having right now.
Yes.
And then abolition is something that we're moving towards, but that is a resolution to the chronic problem of systemic racism and institutional racism that we see pervasively through the criminal justice system, and that we need both. We need measures to deal with the acute, the right now, but we also need a long-term strategic plan for the future.
Yes.
And I think that is an incredibly balanced way to approach this problem. Kay, let's hear your thoughts on this one.
No, that's my short-term mind is pretty clear. I do not see the oversight board as being a step towards abolition. I see it as a step towards equaling out the playing field of BS that we have to deal with right now. It's harm reduction is how I see the oversight board. If we want to talk abolition, which I don't think I will ever see, I don't think I'd see it in my lifetime. The only thing I can do is pray that for my children's children, they could get to a place where they've advocated and fought to the place where we could abolish. But if we're going to talk about abolishing, we have to talk about how we got here in the first place. We have to talk about, what is the economic violence that we're also experiencing due to our states and governments, and how they allow corporations to basically just open it up on us. We have to talk about how we have used police as a scapegoat to not have to deal with all of the other issues that we have because we prioritize profits and dollars and racism over people. So if we say we want to abolish and we also have still defunded mental health care facilities, that's not going to happen. If we say that we want to abolish police and we do not have robust education system, that's not going to happen. If we have people in the streets hungry because they do not have a way to feed themselves or their children, it's not going to happen. So if we are looking to take a comprehensive approach as to all the things that we've dropped on police doorsteps as a society, as a country, unless we're actually ready to get real about fixing what we've broken, and also looking at just how we are and how we prioritize things just in general as a society, and how we allow our governments to do it, I don't think we'll get to a place where we could even say to the slightest that even if we had 100% council members say, yeah, we're going to abolish police tomorrow, and do what? You're going to abolish them tomorrow. Somebody might get held up or something like that at the store. Who are they going to call for that? Like, we can say we want to abolish, but until we've given the greater community a what do we do when something happens, who do I call when something happens, where do I go when something happens, it's not going to happen, and our communities would not support it. That's been my experience. If I'm being completely honest, I've had Black folk and white folk. Well, we don't want to abolish police. We like police. We just want them to be nicer to us when we get there. That's because they see police as a way to get a need met. Until we solve the need, abolition is off the table.
Okay, Kay. So what I'm hearing you say, for the folks in the cheap seats, what I think I'm hearing you say is, first of all, I want to acknowledge the level of jadedness that we hear coming from Kay, which is the first sign for real of a true community activist, because it is so hard on every single day to maintain this pie in the sky hope. I'm working on some litigation against the state right now on behalf of incarcerated people and the way they're being treated on COVID. And some of my white lawyer coworkers on that litigation, I say to them on a regular basis, oh, what it must be like to have the optimism of a white woman in America, right? I wish, you know, it just must be an amazing thing to think that it would just all work out okay. Having said that and acknowledged that, I think what we're hearing Kay say, though, is that abolition is not a slogan. Abolition is not a hashtag. Abolition is a community and a societal shift, a seismic societal shift, a paradigm shift that will take a very long time to do correctly. We cannot just say no more police to starting today and snap our finger without addressing so many of the misconceptions that we have about law enforcement, so many of the misconceptions about what law enforcement does for us and to us, and so many of the misconceptions that people have about marrying their sense of personal safety to law enforcement, right? We have got a lot of work to do. We cannot have communities that can police themselves until we have communities that can feed themselves, that can house themselves, that can make sure that their children are being properly educated, that can have jobs with a living wage and an income where they don't have to worry about whether or not they will be able to stay in their homes. In order for us to be able to abolish the police, we have got to create a world where everyone is invested and fully vested in their own communities. And right now, we don't have a society that does that. Poor people all over this country have no sense of ownership, no sense of investment in their community. Until we address, and I've been seeing it, so I'm about to go there real quick. Over and over again in our chat, people have been talking about the component of mental health and behavioral health as it plays into this. Until we address the untreated trauma in Black and Brown communities, until we address the trauma, the generational trauma that is caused by over-policing, by over-criminalizing, by criminalizing Black and Brown people from birth, right? Until we undo the trauma that this system has caused, we will not be in a place, we will not be healthy enough to say, to do away with this particular form of oppression. Now, it doesn't mean that this form of oppression needs to stay, not at all. What it means is, though, we defund these law enforcement agencies, we invest in our people, we invest in communities, we invest in mental health, we invest in restoration. And then once we accomplish or make some grounds towards restoration, then we can talk about abolition in its full capacity and its full sense. All right, y'all, this has been a fantastic conversation. We are, I think we're a little over an hour in. We have some questions. I'm gonna jump into some of these community questions and we'll address them as we go. So we'll try to get through as many as we can. So one of the questions that we heard is, so one of the questions was about hiring staff is a great idea, but what is the recommendation for smaller towns that don't have the added resources? And I'm gonna let Sean jump on that one.
Okay, thank you. That's a great question. The first NACO conference that I attended was for smaller rural settings, and it was still full of practitioners, but it was mostly scaled down vestiges or scaled down representations of oversight. And I think for Fayetteville, for a city like Fayetteville, I think we're the 6th largest in North Carolina. We're nowhere near as big as Raleigh or Charlotte. So we might not have all the resources, but when you look at our public safety budget, we have $57 million that goes to our police force annually. So that's a good chunk of change. So it's easier for us to make the recommendation that I think we recommend 1% of that go towards implementing oversight. If I'm talking to somebody in Spring Lake, which is in our county, it's the neighboring town, or Hope Mills, another small town, or even going down to like Pembroke in the next county over. they're not going to have a $57 budget or $57 million budget. They're probably not going to be able to hire a hefty staff and the oversight authority. I think the best thing for a small town is if you focus on getting somebody that can, body that can establish oversight. When I say a body, I mean like a board. So instead of going for an oversight authority with hired staff, I'd recommend for a smaller town to really put all of your power into establishing a citizen review board, and then have some language in the resolution that allows for growth and possibly hire of staff as needed. Even in the ordinance that Kathy Greggs did for Fayetteville, we ensure that there's some language that assures for our, that has our authority, gives our authority the ability to make staff hire recommendations. So maybe that's something that comes in the future. But in short, go as hard as you can in the paint for a review board in the absence of millions of dollars to play with.
Hold on. Any other panelists I feel a pressing need to jump onto that one or to respond to this particular question? Okay. We have a lot of questions and we don't have a lot of time. So I want to get to the ones that I think are most, that we can answer quickly. So one of the other questions was, why don't we have review boards for sheriffs and jails? Anybody? I mean, I have an answer.
We should.
That's the answer that I was going to have. You should. You just have to ask different people. You have to ask your county commissioners as opposed to your city council folks. But the sheriffs are different because they are created different in North Carolina. Sheriffs are hierarchically, sheriffs don't really have anyone over them. Sheriffs are like district attorneys. They are directly elected by the people. Their role is created by the North Carolina Constitution. They are on par with the governor's office. They are the sheriff's office. Is the sheriff's office, the governor's office. They're on par hierarchically with those folks. So with citizen review boards that are overseeing police, local municipal police, it is easier for city council to put that in place because city council has the power to oversee your local municipal law enforcement agencies. Sheriffs, however, are a little bit different. And while they get their funding from your county commissioners, that funding cannot come with any real ties from the county commissioner. So there is no real authority over the sheriff's department like there is over municipal law enforcement. So that might answer a little bit of the question. Now, having said all that, where you have your sheriff's department, your sheriff is an elected official. So here's what I would say to you. Stop electing people who don't want to be held accountable. Make sure that the next time you have a sheriff's election, that an oversight board for their office is a part of the platform. And that is an issue that you push, and you push very hard on a local level to make sure that your locally elected sheriff has the same sense of accountabilities, morals, and vision for what community safety looks like that reflects yours. Okay. All right, more questions. Let's see. Police subpoena power for boards, and is the investigator a civilian? Oh, this one was about the Sean. This one is about your the two entities that we talked about. Is the subpoena power for boards, and is the investigator a civilian or police? Sean.
Yeah, the subpoena power in our model would be for the CPOA. So that would be for that oversight authority. In bigger cities where this has been built out for decades, I'm thinking of like a Pittsburgh, they actually have lawyers that are on staff. And if the city pushes back against some information or the police department, guess what? We're going to court to get that. And so in most places in the Northeast, this has already been built out so that legal requirement is, or that legal ability is there. For us in our ordinance, we put in there some room for funds for legal counsel in the case that we should need to subpoena for items that are being held up. And then for us, investigators are civilians. It's 2 civilians that work for that director. They work for the CPOA director. And we're trying to get all of our investigation or most of the investigation away from internal affairs of the police force. That's why we're keeping them civilians. There are cities where it's mixed, where you have police that actually work in the oversight authority, but that's not what we're pushing.
The next question that we have is, and I think we're going to direct it to Kay and to Rolanda, is because I think both of you guys kind of addressed similar issues in your previous dialogues. So the question is, why only Black people on your oversight board? Why only people who are most detrimentally impacted by wayward or lawless cops? Ro, let's start with you, and then I want you to jump on this one too.
Well, we didn't say all Black or only Black people. First of all, we want at least, in our model, there's 11 members, and 6 of those members should be a person of color involved in criminal justice some way, whether they're a lawyer, whether they've been a convict or a person incarcerated, and are no longer tied to probation or parole. And someone that has, identifies as low income or working class, because the people that are most impacted are the ones who bear the brunt of this whole situation, this whole police interaction and community. We share, we hold the highest percentages on all kinds of data across the board from any race. So that being said, it's a no-brainer for me. It's the people that are most impacted are feeling the having to bury their family members, having to, live after the fact of the DA saying that, this officer did nothing wrong, going and having to provide for the kids that are being left behind. And so those things, what I've just mentioned, probably are superficial to someone who is not directly impacted by something like this, but those are the true life after these situations happen, things that are occurring. And someone who's lost a family member to something like this would not probably share the same feelings as someone who's white, someone who hasn't done anything but watched it on TV across America, and just, someone who's been arrested for being wrongly accused and had to sit in jail for 3 to 4 years, 20 years, or however it may be. We've seen all types of cases like that. Those are the people who know what injustice is, and those are the people who will be able to answer or even see clearly, I don't know, not necessarily clearly, but that know what is the system is capable of having the part in the turnout of what a life could be or how a life could be taken. So, I don't even know that I clearly answered that, but I just, they need to be there.
I think I understand what you're saying. I think what you're saying is that that it is the people who are most directly impacted, who are most harmed by lawless cops, who are in the best position to understand where changes need to be made because they've seen it. They see it firsthand. I think that makes perfect sense. Kay, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, because I get that one a lot. And usually by allies or white liberals who mean well, but just don't understand what we're talking about. when we say most impacted folk. When I say most impacted folk on the issue of policing in Greensboro, that's going to be Black people. That's going to be mostly poor Black people. When we talk about some of the most impacted folk by the sheriff department with certain things that they do, that may be undocumented Latinx folk. In some other areas, that may be people of like a Muslim or different religious background. Whoever your most impacted folk are, that's who it should be. And part of the context I'll give to that is, as an ally, it is not your job as a white person to come in with your views and values and liberate everybody. I think sometimes, even I see it within the Democratic Party, and I'm in the Democratic Party as well. This concept of the Caucasian liberator. We're not asking you to necessarily be our liberators. We're asking you to collect your people, be allies, and move the troublesome people out of the way. The impacted people are educated on their own. There are certain assumptions that liberalism has taught us about how we're supposed to show up for other people. We show up for poor people because they must be uneducated. They must have done something so they don't know or understand. So we must go in and save them. We have to go do something for the inner city kids because they don't understand what's going on. It's not that. They have a deeper understanding of what's going on in their communities than you do, even if you got a Harvard degree. What we need is allies. And as a Black woman, I may be in a situation where, which I have been, I'm talking about undocumented folks. You know what I do? Lift up undocumented folks from wherever they are from, and then I get out the way. I use my platform to uplift their issues, and then I get the hell out the way. Even if people want to hear the message from me, they're going to get used to hearing it from the most impacted person, and all of those assumptions that they made about that person, as you push them to those systems, as you push them to levels as to where people are listening to them, as in loaning your respectability to them so that their voices can be heard, so that they can be equitable in that space. In doing that, we're showing what actual diversity and inclusion looks like. Diversity and inclusion doesn't look like you're a white liberator that has a bunch of people of color behind you. And oftentimes that's what we mistake for activism and liberalism here in the United States. But what it actually should be is the most impacted people, even if they don't have the largest numbers, stepping in to speak for themselves, and all of the allies and quote unquote good people going around them to lift them up. That's what it should look like. So that is what I'm saying when I say, sorry, that's what I'm saying when I say the most impacted people. I was like, I hear it a lot. So and I apologize. I do a lot of multiracial organizing, and this is something that continuously comes up. And I'm really passionate about it because, again, I do multiracial organizing too.
Okay, wow, y'all, this panel has been amazing. This has been fantastic. I have learned some things myself. It's always good to be in community with other like-minded folks and other folks who challenge some of the assumptions that you have about many of the things that you hold very dear. That is what community looks like. That is what organizing should be about. It should be about us creating a safe space for us to have differing ideas and plans about how to get to the liberation that we're all trying to get to. And there should be space for everybody's plan here. And I hope that we all feel like there has been space made here for everyone to address fully and in a safe space ideas that are different from others, and to hold those spaces and hold those ideas up, elevate those ideas in a safe space where we can all agree on everything or agree to disagree, whatever the case may be. But it is all about moving towards a liberation for all people and the lifting of oppression from everyone, and the role that law enforcement plays in maintaining that oppressive environment. So
I just want to say that people of color is what is on our proposal. So that means people of other races besides white. It's not just Black. So just understand that.
So at this moment, what I would like to do is give all of our panelists, thank you so much for coming. I would like to give each of you a closing remark, anything that you want to clear up, or any point that you want to nail home, or the thing that you want people to leave this this discussion and remember. If they don't remember anything else, now is the moment. Let's start with Rolanda.
Well, I thank you all for having me today to talk about Raleigh Pack. And I just agree with Kay. I agree with Sean. I agree with Don. I'm glad to work so closely with Don and Sean when we can. Like my perspective, my point of views, my opinions mostly come from being a mother of someone who lost a child to police violence. So that is my platform. That's where I stand, and that's why I don't sit down to have conversations with police. If anything, there'll be a liaison between myself and them to have a conversation. That's my one point that I want to be clear on. Raleigh Pack does not deal with having conversations with police at this point. Maybe sometime in the future we'll get to that trust and understanding that we can do that, but at this point that's not what we're all about. We're trying to hold them accountable for every action that we can where we see they have done an injustice to a family or a person of color, period, like, or anyone in our community of the city of Raleigh. We don't work outside of Raleigh, so everything that we do outside of Raleigh will be in collaboration with whoever, whatever organizer that we can help in those cities outside of Raleigh. Also, I just wanted to say that I am a different type of organizer. I'm a different type of leader. I'm a different type of organization. My organization is very diverse. The people that sit around my table is very diverse because I know that we need all people to move forward in this work, to be able to grab whatever situation we can in whatever way we can with those folks around the table, if you know what I mean. But the leaders that I'm trying to raise up in our community of the city of Raleigh are Black folks. Know that. I want to teach, organize, and make leaders out of the people in the most impacted communities. That is my goal. That is our work at PAC, and that is what our intentions are. Community oversight is just one thing that we are fighting for. And if it hadn't been for the work that I've been doing over the last 4 years, the movement that's going on in Raleigh right now, that I'm very proud of, would not be happening. My speech on May 30th, after George Floyd's death, made folks take action, made folks interested, made folks look for Raleigh Pack to see where they should be in the community. And I'm so proud of the work that I've done. And I thank Don, Sean, Felicia, Ivana, Aaron, Serena, all for helping me with this fight, and some other people that are not here that on this call. Like, we all have to know our place in our work, not be downing other people's work, because it's all needed. It's all intersectional, like we talked about here today. And so, I'm here. I thank y'all for being here. And like, the goal in the end is for us to make some type of change in our area where we live. So thank y'all for having me.
Thank you, Rob. All right, Kay.
So with this, I want to thank y'all for having me on. But the message that I want to leave, because typically I do my organizing with Black folk. But in this moment, I've had an influx of allies wanting to come to the table. And though I love it, it's taken up a lot of space. So one of the things that I want to say to every ally that is on this call is, your activism can't just be in our Black circle. Where you are needed is around your own kitchen tables, your own household, within your government, to call your mayor, to call the corporate entity down the road, to tell your husbands, whoever that says a racist joke across the table, across your dinner table. That is where we need your activism, was collecting your folk. The harm that's being done right now, whether it's babies in cages, whether it's the environment, whether it's taxing, whether it's the economic disparities are happening or that are happening, it's happening because there has been a silence of white allies in the space, not because other voices and other activists have not been pushing and have not been doing work. I think it's just about time that maybe, well, I ain't gonna say about time, I'll just say maybe now is when people are actually starting to listen, because property has been impacted, because relationships have been impacted, because elections have been impacted, because now it's at your doorstep. But what we allow to happen to who we perceive to be the least of us is what we are also condoning to be happening to us and our families as well. So it doesn't have to be a Black baby in a cage by the border for me to activate. You activate. It doesn't have to be just my cousin that went to jail for something he shouldn't have went to for me to show up and say that we need to be mindful of the inmates and the conditions that they have in there right now. If you are an ally on this call, take leadership and advice from Black folk, do your anti-racist education of yourself, and then deploy yourself to your people to fix what's going on in your communities. Because right now the issues happening in mine is directly impacted by the lack of action that's happened in yours. And I will leave that there.
So what Kay is saying, for those of us who are not familiar with this, in the Black community, in our culture, we have a saying that we use very often. It's called, get your cousin, okay? That means whether you're related to them or not, that means if somebody that you know, that you are connected to, is out in this world acting a plum fool, you need to get your cousin. What Kay just said to our white allies is incredibly important. We need for you to get your cousins. That's your grandma who thinks it's okay to still say colored. That's your uncles who think that it's all right to make racist jokes. That's your aunties who say they don't really like Trump, but they're gonna vote for Trump because if they don't, their husbands is gonna get them. That is the people in your family who think that it is okay for little brown children to be in cages as long as it's not little white children in cages. All of those people, that is the work. What Kay is saying, y'all, is we need you to get your cousins. Get them straight. We love that you want to stand with us and you want to use your bodies for us and for this movement, but what we really need for you to do is get your cousins. Sean, last word.
Thank you, Dawn. Oversight, independent oversight of the police is common sense policy. That's why when you look around the country, all the big cities already have it and have had it for decades. North Carolina is inadequately behind. We're lagging behind. Charlotte's had it since 1997. They still don't have an oversight authority. They just have a board that they have problems with frequently. So as a state, we just have to play catch up. I just want to say that we're tied to an overall effort to end mass incarceration and to dismantle the prison industrial complex. And the beauty of that for oppressors is that it doesn't happen with one big shot overhead. That's something we have to fight for in every single community. So if you're in a smaller town and you're on this call, if you're in a smaller city and nobody is doing this work to organize, please be encouraged to do this work for your community. We need to make sure that the Moors and the Burgers get a clear message in their towns that they think are safe, that oversight is there and that change is there. And that's when we'll start to see change in our legislature. That's when we'll start to see personnel records and QI be challenged on a broader level. And then Dawn, thank you for being a generator of power, like all throughout the year for years for us. Kay, I look forward to working with you. Thank you, Felicia, if you're still on, and Ivana for being mentors to this whole process for the state for the last years. And then I'll always make a space to thank Rolanda, because if I had not seen somebody fighting with courage for justice for her son years ago, I wouldn't be on the call. So I always thank you, Rolanda, for your heart and for your courage and all that you do. So thank you.
All right. I hope that everybody who was able to hang on with us, I know we're an hour and a half in. Thank you so much for your dedication and for being a part of this important conversation. We thank you for joining us, and we hope that you will continue to join NC-SPAN for the conversations in the weeks to come. Thank you all so much for your time. Everyone have a great evening.